Hi, and welcome to another episode of the 10 Degree Shift and the Manager to Leader Shift, where we bring loads of amazing guests and we throw a spotlight on their career so that we can share with you some tips and advice and things that have worked for others. And they can, I guess, give you some ideas that might give you a little hand up in your own career and what it is you're trying to do. Today, my guest is Michele Jones, an amazing, beautiful woman whose dear heart is very close to mine. I really love what Michele stands for, and I love her values and her approach to business. And I think that's why, in a way, Michele, we've woven and come in and out of each other's space for a few years now. Michele is the founder and director of LYBL. You can see that behind her if you're watching on YouTube, which is Live Your Best Life. And she's been almost 20 years in that business. We're going to hear more about that, as well as just Michele's journey in leadership. So wonderful to have you here. I know we're on an amazing group together called Thrive Stars, where we're looking at ways for how to make businesses more productive, thriving, healthy, connected, all of the good things.
Yeah.
And so I know there's a great alignment there. Our audience is going to love your story. Welcome, Michele.
Thank you so much, AJ. It's just so wonderful to be here chatting with you because I just love and support all the wonderful work that you do. So when you invited me to be a part of this, I was like, well, wherever you are, I'm there. So just put me down for that. If I can talk about leadership in any capacity and hopefully add some value to anyone out there, whether it be just one person, I'd love to be able to provide that service. So thank you.
Fantastic. So for those people who have never met you before or come across you in business or seen you and stalked you on LinkedIn, like lots of people do these days, can you please just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I guess when we are talking in this space, it's almost a little bit of your evolutionary journey, isn't it? Like, how did I evolve into where I am now, I guess, through the space of maybe business and leadership. And what I've learned as I think about and reflect on that journey is you've got to tune into the essence of perhaps who you've always been, to understand what it is that has been the little percolation point that simmers and sits behind you. And that essence for me, when I look back, even before starting in business, has always been in that, I'd say, that act of service to humanity. I started volunteer work after school at the local nursing home so I could help old people to live a better life, or to add a little bit of joy to their world, or to help the staff there to spread their workload. And then I actually went and joined the Army Reserves because I thought I was going to serve my country should we ever have to go to war. That was the mentality back then. And I felt like if we ever went to war, I'd always have a job, like that's what I thought. Because I had a passion in nursing. So what actually happened as I left school is I applied to do nutrition and dietetics because I very much am in love with the fuel sources that we put into this body of ours as a human being. And then we had to choose two other options to go to university, and I chose medicine and nursing. I got the call from Newcastle Uni to say, sorry, no one knows what nutrition and dietetics is, because this was 1989.
Wow.
It was newly offered, and there weren't enough people who wanted to do it, so it didn't go ahead, which shows how far we've come as a globe, because it's now very common. And then I got asked if I wanted to do medicine, and I was sitting there thinking, that's 6 years. That's a long time as a 19-year-old making that decision. The Army had offered to actually sponsor me, and then that meant that I would owe them 6 years. So I was like, that's 12 years. I don't think so. Why don't we just choose nursing? But my point being that all of those roles were all acts of service to humanity. And I think that is my essence, is that I really believe in being in this planet on this human experience, having this experience together, and it is what we make it. So how did that end up? Well, I did do nursing for the 4 years of my training, and I loved being a nurse. I just loved it. But I didn't really love the industry sector. I found it a little bit mean. I was a university trained nurse, and it was the first year that we'd been trained as
Wow.
nurses via university. So the mentality from the older generation of nurses who we highly looked up to was, what would you know? You got taught from a textbook. And so there was a lot of flack and a lot of setting us up to fail type of moments that weren't very conducive to integrating us into the
Wow.
actual workforce. So I made the decision to leave. It wasn't what I didn't want to leave. And so that then sort of propelled me or springboarded me into where I've been for the last 34 years. So um, I often joke and laugh a little bit because I guess my jam has landed in this space of direct sales and marketing type of environments. And after my family moved from being farmers off the land, my father was in direct sales and marketing. So I really laugh sometimes and say I've maybe been doing that since I was an embryo. Um, but it's this face to face element that I love of anything that we can offer to each other, this human interaction and this human connection, which I have found that I really enjoy about that space. And also, I tend to find it's where a lot of entrepreneurial, they're very high energy, very go getters for life. And I tend to find that they're just beautiful human beings. So 1991 was where I made a shift into that industry. And through many, many different, I'm going to say in 34 years, I've had 27 roles within that sector, um, from like administration, recruitment, office management,
Wow.
bookkeeping, um, board level, overseas expansion, operations management, general management,
Wow.
client account management,
So you
national
know
learning
it
development
inside and
manager,
out.
all the titles. But I guess, again, the essence of everything I did was to serve, but to also solve. So I found that I'm in a role that is literally solution orientated. Wherever I feel there's pain point or a challenge or a gap or a squeaky wheel that an organization keeps sort of over and over going, oh, we're here, we're at this wall again. I just get very, very attuned and quite ferocious around trying to solve the challenge and the problem. Keeping in mind that the people that are going to solve it are the humans. And so it's how we're actually engaging them to be able to help solve those problems, which then creates this empowerment piece for the organization. So
Mm.
um, I found through the different layers of, I guess, entering that space and that industry, that the thing that I loved the most back in the early to mid 90s was organizing the executives and keeping attention to detail on project management and building relationships with service vendors and really sort of growing a database of people within the entire network that all become part of the big well-oiled machine that make organizations tick. And so I thought I need a little side hustle. So my side hustle turned into a business, and it was in concierge services. Now, it was in 2006, so a little bit of perspective on that is it was way before concierge services were even a thing here in Australia. um, it literally meant there was me and three other people in the country that I could find that were doing it. So I'd watched it in America, I'd watched it in the UK, and I was like, oh, I would love to open a business in that. And so there was about three of us who built out the concept of concierge services in Australia when it first popped here, because no one knew what it was. How do we then get people to, even see us or understand that they need these services? And so we actually were in different states of Australia. So we actually all decided, even though we were all separate business owners, we would all help each other to get the buzz about concierge services out to the country. So nationally, we would help to spread the word. And that worked out fantastic, because if I obtained a client in Victoria, but I was in New South Wales, I could then refer them on to the person in Victoria. And we built our business doing that for, oh gosh, 5 years. So it started off as concierge for you, which was my very first business. So again, you can hear the service part already
Yes.
shining through. And so then over time, that business did actually really well. It went from a side hustle to turning over like $1 million within 2 years of business. And then eventually what I did was I sold the infrastructure and the processes and the system that I'd created off, because I started in this journey of really, I'd say personal growth and development journey for me started when I was 15, but this was when it really started to change for me, because I'd been doing what I'd been doing for a long time in the other sector. And
Right.
I kind of hit a bit of a plateau where I was like, what do I do now? I've done all those other roles, I've done all these things, but how can I add value? I felt like I kind of hit my ceiling on value proposition, and I didn't want to. I loved the industry and I wanted to serve. So that's when I found coaching. So everything in our organization up until this point in time had been training. It had been telling people a piece of information, training it, and then trying to understand, get their understanding back and go, right, you've got the knowledge, you know how to do it. And then
Uh-huh.
wondering,
So more of
wondering,
a teaching at
yeah,
model, a telling. Yeah.
yeah, tell talk type of facilitation. And just, they got it, yeah, across they got it, they understood it, and they're going to just go and shine and rock on in their roles.
Yep.
And then after I discovered the sort of coaching mechanisms that were, gosh, they're so vast now, like now they're just a part of everyday living for me. It's funny, I said I'm going to go and study, and I thought I was going to go and study because I wanted to add value to others, right? But the first year of coach training was all about me and dealing
Yes.
with some stuff that I hadn't recognized about my own map of the world. Deep habitual patterns that probably weren't serving me, and just recognizing different patterns of my own behavior. And I actually found that first year became all around, I said I wanted it to be around weight loss, and I've like falling pregnant. But it was so much more than that. It was, once I started peeling back those layers, I think the first year, literally, I didn't coach anyone or anything. It was all around just diving into me.
Yeah.
So
And I think my journey was the same. And a lot of coaches, you kind of do the coach training and it brings up a lot of stuff. And I think that's really important because we have to build our foundation first. And so we do need to shine a light on any of those little nooks and crannies. And I think the coaching journey is very similar to a leadership journey, that leaders have to unpeel some of that stuff in order to almost pull apart their building to put in stronger foundations so that they can go higher. I always say if you want to go higher, you've got to go deep first.
Deeper.
And
Yes.
if you want to grow your career or your team, you've got to dig deep into those foundations. And often our personal foundations aren't deep enough. And so we do have to pull it all apart and start again and kind of find bedrock.
That was exactly what it was like. And I think the nail on the head for me there, as you were speaking, is it is leadership, but it's around, that journey was all around self-leadership, self-acceptance, self-understanding, self-awareness. So it seemed very me-centric, but what I have learned through that is total responsibility for where I am and who I am as a person, and how the things around me Yes, we do have a role in what we are projecting out to the world and what we're receiving back. But there's also all the other people on their own journeys too. And it just made me realize that to solve anything in my world, I just have to actually go within myself. Rather than this, I see a lot of people always constantly reaching externally. And I think the more you reach outside of yourself and you're not able to sit with and I guess take stock of who you are and who you're being, and then deciding and discerning, is this who I actually want to be?
Mm.
I think that we're always going to be, I don't know, not quite tipping the point. I always think of your word joy, finding that true state of what it really means to be joyful. It means that we're always relying on others to bring
Mm.
that state. And I really feel that going inward was important. So much so that further down the track, it led me to studying yoga and meditation just to be able to continue to continually go back within to find those answers or to seek the answers. I'm not saying,
100%.
well, it doesn't mean that we don't. Obviously, I still rely on people who are part of my, what would I say, support network in that way. Like I still have a coach, or
Yeah.
I still have, a remedial person if I feel my body needs a bit of work. But in that way, I'm actually saying and making that decision that I want you to do this for me rather than you're going to fix this for me.
Yeah. And it's a little bit like sometimes we need others to hold up the mirror, to show our blind
Yeah.
spots, to reflect back to be sounding board. So I like to think of it as my little board of directors, that we all
That's
have to have our
great.
own kind of company of directors. And I've got my close circle that does that for me. But I think even what you're saying for many leaders, and I know from my own personal journey, we have to find a way of doing a ritual almost of that daily reflection and finding that resourcefulness within and not just seeking it outside of ourselves. And for some people, that outside of themselves could even be substances, whether that's caffeine or alcohol or whatever it might be. We're all looking for that reinforcement, press the button on the poker machine. And until we actually find how to get that from within, we are always looking outside of ourselves. And it also means when things go wrong, we can deflect a blame outside of ourselves. So I love what you were saying about total responsibility. And I guess
Responsibility.
the language I use is 100% accountability. That whole thing of, my experience of the world is up to me. And yeah, bad things happen to good people, but how we navigate and how we grow through that is 100% our accountability.
See, that's why I vibe you, because I get that. I love that. That's exactly how I feel. Yeah, that's exactly how I kind of filter my world through that lens. I think it's an important thing that shifted within me. Otherwise we can fall into blame, deny, justify, and it's all outside of us. And the minute we take that stock and say, yeah, there is a level of my own self accountability or responsibility, I feel that our experience of the world can be whatever we design it to be, to create it to be, to live it to be. And that's actually part of our concept at LYBL, or Live Your Best Life, is let's figure out what you want it to design. So you talk about going deep with the foundations. Just like any architect, we become the architects of our own life. So we spend a lot of time in the design phase, not too long, where you immobilize yourself and don't get started and pick up the tools, because you want to be able to just at least take stock on, well, if I'm going to go on this journey, I want to map out a little bit of where I'm headed. Otherwise, I could just end up going here, there, and everywhere and not really end up at any destination that I intended. And that can be good for some, but I don't know, most of us, I think, want to start with an end in mind and be able to sort of navigate our way towards that. Like if I want to go to Brisbane today, I know I've got to keep the ocean on my right.
Yeah.
That, like, I need something, otherwise I'm not going to get to Brisbane. But design, create, and live is a really big philosophy of ours, because it moves us from looking at the design of it, which is all in the sort of thinking and the dream state, and then creating moves it to action, and then living moves it into the state of being or the state of play, which is very simple concept, but one that we're really big about. So I think just to kind of close out the story on that journey was in 2011, I started that coaching journey. And what I loved about being able to bring that back into the organization that I've been working alongside for 34 years. I started off as an employee in my early 20s. And over time, I've moved to being able to work back with that organization as a consultant, running my own business. And that's just allowed me to put so many fingers in different pies across the globe for them. But literally, 2011 was all around how can I then bring what I'd learned from my own journey and all the teachings of coaching and then change this training philosophy that was nestled in this organization with around 220 offices around the world. So it was a pretty large organization that we needed to figure out how do we do that? How do we do it in different cultures? How do we do it in different languages? How do we actually start? So it started with a little group of 13 people.
Yeah.
I was given 13 people to be my, I don't like to use guinea pigs, but they
Guinea
were.
pigs. Test case.
I think we sort of, I'm like, I don't think anyone really wants to use guinea pigs for anything. But it's I was given my little bunch of pioneers, pioneers. And what we realized that by just shifting the focus from a training organization to a coaching philosophy and a coaching organization, that we were able to move just a group of 13 in one organization to improve the ROI and output productivity and their overall state of well-being and what they felt they were adding value to the organization by 400%. And I was like, what?
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't believe it myself. And so that obviously that made all the directors up the line pay a lot of attention. And so then we were able to get the green light to roll it out. And now that entire organization is still here today. They're absolutely doing amazing things around the world. And I'm now a CEO consultant to one of their agencies in the fundraising and philanthropy space. So again, going full circle back to serving humanity and making a difference together in that space. So in 2006, Concierge for You was what it was. I sold Concierge for You, but by then I realized as I was building my coaching journey that I had all these For You registered business names. And I don't know if anyone has ever done this in business. When you get an idea, you go and register a domain name for it. And before I knew it,
I have probably 100 domain names. I have a brain fart in the night and I register
a name.
domain name.
And so I was like, I had Concierge for You, I had Health Coach for You, Wellness Coach for You, Business Coach for You, Leadership Coach for You, you name it. I had all the For You coach names you could find, Wealth Coach for You. And eventually what happened over time, I think by about 2012, I just went, you know what, let's just call ourselves the For You Corporation. And let's get rid of all the subsidiary For You names. And our tagline for You Corporation was Live Your Best Life. It still is to this day. And so For You Corporation started to offer consulting and coaching services. I no longer was doing the concierge services. And then what we noticed and identified that as I started to offer all these coaching modalities and programs and offerings to the sector is we realized that directors and CEOs wanted to have a space in which they could explore themselves away from their middle managers and maybe, you know, ground level personnel. So that became known as Living Your Best Life, because what was running in the business was running in the leader of the business. And so you could enter the market sort of going, hey, let's talk about culture and leadership, and allowing your middle managers and their teams to experience these programs. But eventually the aha moment would come where the leader would go, oh man, I've got to do my own work, because I'm capping all of the growth, I'm capping all of the people, and I need to do some work. So I did a little pilot where I called it the Live Your Best Life retreats. Now, I started these retreats because I live in the beautiful Lake Macquarie, in New South Wales, in Toronto. And I started these retreats because, never do it simple. Why don't you just go big from the beginning? A houseboat program where we would go out on the lake. And so there was 3 houseboats all tethered together. You had our facilitation boat with our crew boat, which is our coach team, and our skipper and our chef, and then 2 houseboats tethered alongside, one for the girls, one for the boys, and we would literally take away a maximum group of 10. Ideally we wanted 8, and because we always wanted to offer 1 coach for every 2 people, so that everyone felt held, supported, seen, so they could unravel and someone could be there. And through that process, that's how we grew organizations, through growing the leaders of the organizations and the directors and the CEOs. And we would then take all of that back into their organization, and they just would begin being this new person that they had transformed into, which was really just their fullest potential of themselves anyway, rewired, reprogrammed. And then they started, just sending lots of people our way, because then they realized their middle managers needed to do that work and so forth. But that's kind of where the Live Your Best Life came from, because we took the tagline of Living Your Best Life from 4U Corporation, and it morphed into its own global brand. And so, I was just reflecting, it's nearly 20 years I've been in business now. It was June 2006.
Yeah.
Coaching began in 2011, and that's now a bit of a blend for me now. I now do coaching, I do leadership, I do culture, but I also work on strategic direction for businesses, and organizations. And predominantly with this one large organization, I'm probably, that's probably 80% of my time, because the whole network is geared around development and growth and dream state and strategy and process and structures, but doing that in a way that considers the human.
So there's so much to unpack in all of that. I think we could spend 16 hours actually unpacking all of that. I'm going to try and hone it in.
Yeah, let's bring it in.
I think, firstly, I completely agree that there's also evidence and science that shows that, especially from human synergistics and the LSI tools and the research they've done over a number of years, that it literally is the more self-actualized, the more conscious the leader is, the more they've done the deep, deep work, the higher the organization can go. And so that's their culture, their engagement, but it's also their profits, how they are, if they're listed on the stock exchange, all of those sorts of things. So in every metric, they're safer, their staff are more psychologically safe, they're happier, their customer scores are higher when the leader has done the work. And I know I've found some leaders go kicking and screaming. Some of them think, I don't need to do the work because I've done it all before. And they're like, just sort out my people.
Just sort it out for me,
I've also seen it where whole leadership teams go through a program, but not the very high echelon. And then those leaders, as they've grown, start pushing upward. And then their CEOs and their board of directors are like, oh, what's going on here? Because they get quite exposed because the leaders behind them are growing so much. I've seen leaders have to leave an organization because the people above them weren't growing in that way. So there's a lot in all of that. One thing I'm really curious about, and it might be a bit left of your expectations and where that was going, but I'm curious, in all of those coach for you and wealth for you and all of that, and I hear your theme throughout your career of acts of service, I'm curious about your own journey and has there been points of burnout or where you've taken on too much? Because when I hear for you, I hear very done for you. I'm going to serve and support you. And I'm just curious about, have you had lessons around
Yeah,
that
big
along your
one.
journey? Yeah. Do you want to share any of that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I could probably sum it up in this one defining moment. To be quite honest about it, and it hit me really hard. And it was just as I'd started the coaching journey. I was having this moment where I was at the office. We were preparing for a big workshop event, a meeting, and it was coming quite hard and fast. We're down to the wire. And I remember at 6 o'clock, the director walking out the door going, "Hey, have a good night, Mish." I'm like, "Yep, yep, bye." And then bit by bit, people were peeling themselves out of the office, going out to, things. "Goodbye, see you, Mish, see you later." And I got to about 11 o'clock that night and I was still at the office. And I remember this wave of resentment just coming over me, like, how dare they? Don't they know how much work we've got to do? And I remember calling the director because I needed something signed off. It was like at 10:30 at night. And this probably ricocheted to the 11 o'clock feeling. But it was just like, well, you figure it out. You figure it out. And I went, well, I'm here on my own and there's no one here. I even now need to bind the books and do this because nothing was ready. And I just remember a feeling of resentment and then quite a feeling of anger start to rise within me. And I had this experience at about 2 o'clock that morning, still at the office, where I felt like the world was shining just a spotlight on me and everything went black around me. And this is also why my brand colors are black and white,
Oh,
for a
wow.
reason, because it is literally like where the duality of the contrast had to meet for, when you always meet the approval seeking type of people that are like, yeah, no problems. I've got that. I'll do it. Yeah, no problem. Well, that was me. I was an approval seeker. And I think even when I started doing human synergistics work, there was still a little bit of that left over, where I needed to really still discern. But I often use the analogy of when you walk into a dark warehouse and you're trying to figure out it's really pitch black, like what's in this dark warehouse, and the only thing you've got is a torch. That torch is literally is only going to illuminate where you shine the torch. So unless you're prepared to shine the torch and look around the corners, up, down, all around, you're only going to be looking in this one point. And I remember that feeling of, I was sat in the office. It was like the roof of the office had lifted itself off, and there was just this spotlight shining down on me going, you are the problem, not anybody else.
Wow.
Consequently, as the awakening to that occurred, the following 2 years, I was dealing with adrenal fatigue because I'd actually said enough was enough and I drew the line in the sand, and it was almost like the body just went, oh, now we can relax, because
Yeah,
I'd
thank goodness.
revved the engines that long that my adrenals were literally clapping out. And I just remember having to run around to acupuncturists and this and that and trying to pull those people together externally to help me fix the problem. And the problem literally was everything that I had to do internally. And I just knew in that moment that I could not ever be that person again. And so I've danced with it over the years, where I can feel the needle rise, and I now understand the trigger points and I understand what's happening. And I literally have, back to what we said before, having to have those healthy, self-regulatory, aware type of mechanisms where you just know you end up creating what I think shifts over time. But if you follow life and look at it in that way, you create your own little winning formula for how to never be back in that situation again, because you literally can, it's almost like I don't know, pinball, right? I'm going to
Yeah.
keep myself in the game, but I've got to do it in a way that is definitely where I'm in control of it to some degree. Like life is always going to bend and flex around us, but I need to know that I've got my boundaries, buffers, and I understand where I can bump into and when I need to course correct to be able to still play the
Mm,
rules to my state of play that still allow me to feel like I'm moving forward as a human being, but definitely not at the cost of feeling that I'm just people pleasing or seeking validation or wanting recognition. Because
yeah.
definitely that was my old map of the world. I know that now. Like I can look at it and go, I just wanted someone to see me, and it took
Yeah.
me seeing myself with a spotlight shone on me that. And after that, I just started taking responsibility. I started going for walks, not working through my lunch break. It started off small, like I would prepare my own food rather than going, "Oh, I didn't have time to cook my food," you know? So now I don't have any, and now I don't have time to go out for lunch, so I'm not gonna
And now
eat
I'm
now.
angry. Yeah, and my cortisol's gone through the roof. So I'm curious about a couple of last questions. Given all of that, and what I've seen many leaders do, and I have 100% been guilty of this as well, is when I have A-type personality staff who get stuff done, who are committed, who are maybe people pleasing, that it's really easy to punish them with more work. It's really easy to rely on them. And when someone's in that mode, they're more likely to say yes, and I'll take that on. How do you instill and coach and up-level new leaders to manage
Yeah.
their people, but also not at the cost of their own well-being as well?
Well, it's a great question because the organization that I have predominantly been alongside for 34 years are like go-getting type A type personalities. So to actually shift the culture from, let's say, like late 1990s, which was very, sorry, early 1990s, till I'm going to say up until probably, I'm even going to say, right, even up to like 2005, it was like work hard, play hard, hustle, grind, and you get ahead if you work really hard. And so, what I've done as I've been given the privilege to lead different teams and being like a CEO role, is I literally say that that stops with me. That generation, that stops with me. It's no longer acceptable. And I still find I got to rein it in. Like I have to actually hold the mirror up because people that work within our team will know that I've got that mission that it's going to stop with me. And I'm going to hold a mirror up when I see that you potentially, from my lens of the world, and based on what you've and I've decided is you going outside of your own buffer system, that I can call you out on it and I can actually now, with permission, say no. That's not going to happen. So you figure out another way because that is not allowed anymore. And
Wow.
it still takes time. It doesn't always happen straight away. But those conversations are had and they're healthy and they're allowed. And we have code words for it now, especially with some of the team members that I know that we've had, you know, yourself and your team come in and facilitate with, where it's like, I'm aware and I'm okay. So as long as there's awareness and there's an okay, because it's like, well, it doesn't always have to be the way we all think it's got to be. As long as that person is aware that, and it's like, I'm okay. I know it's going to actually shift back in like 3 days, but I'm gunning for it and I'm all good for it. But thank you for checking in. And
Yeah.
so, and that's where we've just started to change the generational line. And we have noticed, which is, I don't know how you say it, but we have noticed that those of us that are sort of sat in our 40s and 50s age bracket are actually worse for it than our junior staff members. The junior staff members seem to have it all figured out. Like they're like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do it another time in another way, and I'll do it and I'll still deliver. It's actually the older generations that we're having to like work with to reprogram and rewire on it, because we probably do have a little bit of attachment theory to, we were taught work hard, you'll get ahead.
Yeah. Agree, completely agree. And I think that's really great advice. I love the idea or concept of having code words with staff. I was working with a team yesterday, for example, in Port Macquarie, and I've been working with them over a year, and they've been through a number of restructures and some real challenges. And they had some people who were really carrying some grief over that, some, you know, emotional stuff over that. And then they were being asked to push harder. And we really had to do a little reset with them to go, some people actually need some time to heal before they can push harder. And they're actually not being slack. They're actually going through something. And it was almost like a switch happened the moment that grief and sadness was acknowledged, and we actually drew it with them. We drew their whole journey and we talked about the emotions. And it was the first time they'd really talked about emotions in the workplace. It had always just been positions and an org chart. And when they talked about the emotions,
AJ, that is so important.
Yeah. And it almost released, like they've still got stuff to work through, but it released a whole burden that some of them were carrying because they were trying to push it down. And now the team acknowledge and go, okay, this is possibly going to be something challenging for this person. How do we work together to make that work for you? And so there's this beautiful synergy happening in the team where they're allowing each other the space that they need whilst they're all still delivering. It's not like an opportunity to slack off, but it is a flexibility that maybe wasn't there before. That is a real human-centered way of working.
Yeah. I just love that. It's interesting because I think the older generation that I was referring to used to have this mentality, especially in the sector I was in, which is all sort of results and results, really results based around the individual performance. When it was real sort of sales dog mentality, you know, it's shifted, especially in the fundraising and philanthropy space. I find it's way more humanistic. But interestingly, it used to be leave your emotions at the door when you walk in. And so that generationally has shifted with, I say that that's not going to happen on my watch. So your emotions are actually the beautiful part of who you are, whether you want to express them in any which way, resourcefully or unresourcefully. They're going to hold a lot of clues around where you are currently at and kind of opposing potentially where you want to be. So emotions, some still choose to keep them very status quo, but we definitely run a culture where your emotions are allowed, and we have different ways in which you can express those, and we just allow team members to choose appropriate times and places and how to do that. And discerning for themselves, is this emotion about to be resourceful or unresourceful, to have that sort of emotional intelligent piece as to how it may impact others around them, you know. But it's all allowed. And I'm like, if your tears haven't come down your face and hit your cheekbone, then you haven't actually acknowledged this emotion, because we're taught to pick a tissue up and push it all back in. I'm like, especially at our retreats, I'm like, get the tears down past the jawbone, acknowledge that that is an emotion for you, and let the snot come out.
Yeah.
It's good for you.
I was just at a camp with elders on the weekend, and anytime someone cried, they would specifically say, tip your head forward, please let your tears go back onto Mother Earth. Like it's important to allow that cycle and for her to feel that and express that.
I think
now I'm really conscious we're getting close to time. As I said, 16 hours I reckon we could talk for. So I have one final question that I'd love to ask you. And that is, right now, given all of that and all of that background that you've shared, what are you most grateful for right now?
I feel like the first thing that came through just now was, I'm grateful for the life that I'm living, um, in the sense that it is around choice, and I get to choose who I'm going to be alongside. I don't know if this is a wisdom piece now, but it's like every moment of my action and my ability to be grateful to wake up today is around human connection, whether that's connection with me or connection with others. And I really feel like where I'm at right now, it's to me, I don't really do non-deep meaningful connection. So for me, it's called an, I guess it's like an inner depth, and that inner depth allows me to see the people around me, and I think that that's what I'm most grateful for, is being able to look into another human's eyes and say, you know, we're here together doing this in this human experience and life. And we know we could say that it's about our legacy piece or whatever it is, or our sacred work or sacred calling, but at the end of the day, that's all still a man-made construct. I think that we are here just to be able to be grateful for each other. And I love some of the taglines that I've collected along the way, from like living your best life. That's what I'm grateful for, life itself. But I'm also grateful for when you consider life and the fact that it is usually done in connection with other human beings, that we are able to do that from a place of making a difference together, whatever that difference is. And I think it's almost like the dash on the epitaph, isn't it? It's like, what does the dash mean? So it's the meaning that we discern and give to the time that we have here. And I think I'm just grateful for life. And I have been in situations where I have faced life. You know, I have had those health challenges. I've had cancer journey. I had adrenal burnout. And I am grateful to have breath, which indicates life. So
Amazing. And of course, you ended there. I love that. And I'm very grateful for you being one of those people that I have that deep connection with. I'm really grateful for your time today and sharing openly, wholeheartedly. I think, as I was just saying, the weekend I've just had away with elders was all around that we're walking the new dreaming. And how do we do that together in fullness and full conscious awareness? And even if it's in business, we're still walking this new dreaming. This is the co-creation of the new world that we all want to live, work, and play in. And I'm really grateful for the part that you play as well, Michele. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your insight, and your depth with all of us today. Bless you.
Thank you, AJ, and just keep up the amazing work that you're doing to share that message, because I just think that's the world appears to be shifting, you know, and it feels really beautiful to think what is this new state of co-creation, and what will this world become. I know I hear some doomsdayers often say that it's, well, this world, you know, it's not headed in a good direction, but I tend to have a little bit more hope than that. I think that what I'm seeing in the world today is definitely a lot more richer and fuller and abundant than where we've come from. So,
Hurrah! 3 cheers for that. Thank you. Until next time.
All right. Well, thank you very much.